They called us naive, primitive, a species too young to understand the delicate balance that kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart. The Galactic Council warned us repeatedly about our aggressive nature, our tendency toward violence, our inability to truly grasp the concept of eternal peace. We listened, we tried. We bent our backs, breaking ancient weapons into plowshares, turned our warships into exploration vessels, and opened our arms to embrace a universe that promised us belonging. For 300 years, humanity walked the path of peace they demanded. We ignored every instinct that screamed danger when pirates raided our outer colonies. We held our fire when slavers took our children. We negotiated when we should have fought, compromised when we should have stood firm, and trusted when we should have prepared. The Council said we were finally learning, finally evolving beyond our barbaric origins. They were wrong. When the Devourers came from the void between galaxies, when ancient horrors that had slept for millennia awakened hungry for living worlds, when the very fabric of civilized space began to unravel, the Council finally understood what they had done. They had declawed the only species in the galaxy that knew how to fight monsters. By then, it was almost too late. Almost. But humanity remembered. Deep in our bones, in the darkness between heartbeats, we remembered what we truly were. Not the peaceful farmers they wanted us to become, not the diplomatic negotiators they trained us to be. We were survivors. We were warriors. We were the children of a world that had tried to kill us for millions of years and failed. And we were done listening to warnings. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the towering crystalline council chambers of New Olympus, watching the morning light scatter through the translucent walls like broken promises. 300 years ago, her ancestors would have called this place impossible. Today, it was just another reminder of how far humanity had come from its violent origins. The soft chime of her neural implant drew her attention to an incoming priority message. The sender's designation made her stomach clench. Emergency Council session. Immediate attendance required. Classification: Extinction Protocol. Sarah had served as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 15 years. In all that time, she had never seen an extinction protocol activated. The very existence of such a classification suggested threats beyond the careful diplomatic language that governs civilized space. She hurried through the gleaming corridors, her soft-soled diplomatic shoes silent on the bioluminescent floors. Other ambassadors moved with similar urgency, their various forms creating a bizarre parade of evolutionary diversity. The Altarians floated in their environmental bubbles, tentacles writhing with anxiety. The crystalline Zeph Hay rang like wind chimes as they walked, their usual melodious tones now discordant with worry. Even the massive Corathan representatives, normally slow and deliberate in their movements, displayed an urgency that sent tremors through the station's superstructure. The council chamber itself was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy, a vast spherical space where gravity could be adjusted to accommodate the needs of any species, with translation matrices that could convert not just language but emotional context and cultural nuance. Today, the sphere buzzed with tension so thick it felt like breathing syrup. High Counselor Vexnari, the ancient Altarian who had guided galactic politics for over 2 millennia, floated at the chamber's center. Her usually serene expression was replaced by something Sarah had never seen before. Fear. Honored representatives. Vexnari's voice carried through the translation matrix with unusual weight. We face a crisis beyond our current understanding. Long-range sensors in the Andromeda approach have detected massive energy signatures moving toward our galaxy. These signatures do not match any known technology or natural phenomenon. A holographic display materialized in the chamber's center, showing the spiral arms of their galaxy. At the edge of the display, red markers pulsed with ominous rhythm. Sarah counted them quickly. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of contacts, all moving in perfect formation toward civilized space. Initial analysis suggests we have approximately 18 months before these entities reach our outer territories, Vexnari continued. Preliminary data indicates they are consuming everything in their path. Stars, planets, entire systems are being stripped of matter and energy. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, each species expressing alarm in their own way. The Corathan's deep bass rumbling mixed with the Zephyrhae's crystal chiming and the Altarian's high-pitched harmonics. Sarah remained silent, a habit ingrained through decades of diplomatic training. Humanity had learned to listen first, speak last, and choose words carefully. Ambassador Thekmore of the Corathan Collective, his massive stone-like form making the chamber's floor creak, spoke first. Have we attempted communication with these entities? Perhaps they are merely explorers, like ourselves. All communication attempts have failed, Vexnari replied. They do not respond to any known language, mathematical constant, or universal greeting protocol. More disturbing, our deep space monitoring stations have gone silent as these entities approach. Complete communication blackouts in 17 sectors. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's environmental controls. The galaxy's early warning system was vast and redundant, designed to prevent exactly this kind of surprise. For stations to go silent without even a distress signal meant something was systematically destroying them before they could react. What of the Sentinel fleets? Asked Representative Cortal of the Hegemony Worlds. Surely our combined naval forces can mount an adequate defense. The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The Sentinel fleets were the Council's pride, vast armadas of ships designed for peacekeeping and exploration. They were marvels of defensive technology, equipped with shields that could withstand stellar phenomena and weapons designed for precision rather than destruction. They had been deliberately engineered to end conflicts without excessive casualties, to protect rather than destroy. Our tactical analysts have run thousands of scenarios, Vexnari said, her tentacles drooping with exhaustion. Against conventional threats, the Sentinel fleets would be more than adequate. But these entities appear to absorb energy directed at them. Every weapons test we've simulated shows our defensive capabilities being turned against us. Sarah's mind raced. She had studied galactic history extensively, including the classified records of pre-Council conflicts. Before the Great Peace, before humanity and dozens of other species had agreed to limit their military capabilities, there had been wars that scarred entire star systems. The weapons used in those conflicts had been banned, their knowledge suppressed, their very existence erased from official history. Perhaps, Sarah said carefully, we should consider alternative approaches. The chamber fell silent. All attention focused on her, and Sarah felt the weight of 300 years of human diplomatic efforts. Her species had worked harder than any other to prove they belonged in civilized space, to demonstrate that they had evolved beyond their violent past. What do you suggest, Ambassador Chen? Vexnari asked. Sarah took a breath. Some species in this galaxy have military capabilities that predate the Council's weapons restrictions. Perhaps it's time to reconsider our stance on certain historical assets. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Several representatives began speaking at once, their voices creating a din of diplomatic outrage. Words like barbaric, regression, and unthinkable filtered through the translation matrix. Councillor Zetherim of the Peaceful Worlds Coalition, his crystalline form flashing with indignation, spoke over the chaos. Ambassador Chen, surely you're not suggesting we abandon 3 centuries of progress? The weapons restrictions exist for good reason. The last time unrestricted warfare occurred in this galaxy, entire civilizations were extinguished. And now, Sarah replied, her voice carrying more steel than she had intended, we face the potential extinction of all civilizations. Perhaps the cure for extinction isn't more restrictions, but the tools we've chosen to forget. She gestured to the holographic display, where the red markers continued their inexorable advance. These entities don't care about our diplomatic protocols. They don't recognize our peace treaties or our ethical guidelines. They are a force of pure consumption, and peaceful intentions won't stop them. The human perspective, Representative Corthal said with barely concealed disdain, has always been colored by your species' unfortunate predisposition toward violence. Just because you cannot conceive of a peaceful solution doesn't mean one doesn't exist. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. After 3 centuries of proving their worth, of demonstrating their commitment to peace, of bending over backward to accommodate every other species' concerns, humanity was still seen as the violent newcomers who needed to be controlled. With respect, she said, my species has observed the peace for 300 years. We've contributed more to galactic humanitarian efforts than any other race. We've shared our technology freely and asked for nothing but acceptance in return. But we've also retained our historical knowledge, including knowledge that might be relevant to our current crisis. High Councillor Vexnari raised a tentacle for silence. What specifically do you propose, Ambassador? Before the restrictions, Earth maintained detailed records of defensive strategies against overwhelming odds. We have historical precedent for asymmetric warfare against superior forces. We also have knowledge of weapons systems that prioritize maximum effect over precision diplomacy. The chamber's environmental systems hummed louder as if struggling to process the implications of her words. Sarah could see the fear in her colleague's eyes. Fear not just of the approaching threat, but of what humanity might become if unleashed.
You speak of weapons that could destroy worlds, Councillor Zetherim said. his crystal form dimming with horror.
Humanity agreed to abandon such things. It was the price of admission to civilized space. And what good is civilized space if it doesn't exist? Sarah shot back. You're talking about principles while staring at our own extinction. I'm talking about survival. The debate that followed was unlike anything the Council had experienced in centuries. Species that had coexisted peacefully found themselves divided along fundamental lines. Some, particularly the older civilizations that had survived pre-Council conflicts, understood the gravity of the situation. Others, raised entirely in the era of galactic peace, couldn't conceive of returning to what they saw as barbarism. Hours passed. The holographic display continued its grim countdown, showing the approaching entity's steady progress toward the galaxy's outer rim. Mathematical models scrolled past, each one showing the same result: total consumption of all matter and energy in their path. Finally, High Council of Exnari called for order. We will recess for 6 hours to allow for consultation with home governments. When we reconvene, we will vote on whether to invoke Emergency Protocol 7. Sarah didn't need to look up the protocol. She had studied them all during her diplomatic training. Emergency Protocol 7 was the suspension of all weapons restrictions in the face of existential threat. It hadn't been invoked since the Council's formation, and many had hoped it never would be. As the chamber emptied, Sarah remained in her seat, staring at the holographic display. The red markers had moved perceptibly closer during the session, consuming light years of space while they debated the ethics of fighting back. Her personal communicator chimed with an encrypted message from Earth. The priority code indicated it came from the highest levels of human government. As she read it, Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. Outer colonies in the Terminus sector report complete communication blackout. Last message received. They're here. They're beautiful. They're... No survivors detected. Recommend immediate activation of Lazarus protocols. Sarah closed her eyes. The Lazarus protocols were humanity's deepest secret, known only to a handful of people in each generation. They were the plans, hidden in the dark spaces between official records, for what humanity would do if the galaxy's peace ever failed catastrophically. They were the blueprints for war. As she left the Council chambers, Sarah sent a single-coded message back to Earth. 3 words that would change everything. Begin the awakening. Behind her, the holographic display continued its silent countdown. The entities were no longer approaching the galaxy's edge. They were already inside it, and they were accelerating. The Age of Peace was ending, whether the Council voted for it or not. The only question now was whether civilization would fight back or simply watch itself be consumed. Sarah Chen had spent her entire career proving that humanity belonged in civilized space. Tonight, she would help decide whether civilized space deserved to survive. The irony wasn't lost on her. The species that everyone had been most afraid of unleashing might be the galaxy's only hope. In the depths of space, ancient things that had no names began to feed on the outer worlds. They found the peaceful civilizations unprepared, their defensive systems optimized for deterrence rather than destruction. World after world fell silent, their final transmissions speaking of beauty and wonder even as they were consumed. The warnings had been ignored for too long. Peace had made them weak. But in the hidden military installations of a dozen worlds, locked away for 3 centuries, weapons began to wake up. And on a small blue planet at the galaxy's edge, humanity started to remember what it had spent 300 years trying to forget. War was coming, and for the first time in centuries, that might be exactly what the galaxy needed. 7. Deep beneath the mountains of Earth's northern continent, in chambers that officially didn't exist, Admiral Marcus Reeves stood before a site that had been hidden from the galaxy for 3 centuries. Row upon row of dormant war machines stretched into the darkness, their forms sleek and deadly in the emergency lighting's red glow. The Lazarus vaults had been sealed when humanity joined the Galactic Council, their contents deemed too dangerous for the peaceful galaxy they were entering. Now, as Marcus watched maintenance drones awakening systems that had slumbered for longer than most civilizations had existed, he wondered if their ancestors had been naive or simply hopeful. "Status report," he commanded, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading expert on pre-Council military technology, emerged from behind one of the massive constructs. Her hands were stained with lubricants that hadn't been manufactured in 3 centuries, but the facility's automated systems had maintained perfect stocks of everything needed for this moment. "The destroyers are coming online now," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth that would dissolve completely within minutes. "Their AI cores are intact, though we'll need to update their threat recognition protocols. They still think the Altarians are enemies. Marcus nodded grimly. The destroyer-class ships had been humanity's answer to the last great galactic war before the Council's formation. Unlike the elegant minimalist designs of modern Sentinel fleet vessels, these were pure function following the most lethal form possible. They existed for one purpose: to eliminate threats to human survival. What about the Guardian network, he asked. More complex. Elena replied, leading him deeper into the vault. The Guardian satellites were designed to protect entire star systems, but they require manual authorization codes for each deployment. The Council's restrictions didn't just limit our weapons, they made us forget how to use them properly. They passed through a series of blast doors, each one thick enough to withstand direct nuclear bombardment. Beyond lay the heart of humanity's hidden arsenal, the command and control center for every piece of restricted military technology Earth had ever developed. The CCC was a sphere of black crystal and living metal, its surface crawling with data streams and tactical displays. As it powered up for the first time in centuries, the walls came alive with information. Star charts, threat assessments, fleet compositions, resource allocations, all the tools needed to wage war on a galactic scale. How long until we can deploy? Marcus asked. The ships themselves can be operational within hours, Elena said. But Admiral, we're talking about weapons designed to fight conventional enemies. We don't know what we're really facing. As if summoned by her words, a priority communication request appeared in the air before them. Ambassador Chen's image materialized, her usually composed diplomatic mask cracked with exhaustion and strain. Admiral Reeves, thank God you received my message. The Council is deadlocked. Half the species want to try further diplomatic contact with the entities. The other half want to evacuate the outer systems and establish defensive positions around the core worlds. And the entities themselves? Marcus asked. Sarah's image flickered as the quantum communication array struggled with the distance. They've consumed 7 more systems since I sent the activation codes. Each attack follows the same pattern. Total communication blackout, then nothing. No debris, no survivors, no trace that billions of beings ever existed. Marcus studied the tactical displays surrounding him. The ancient systems were already processing available data, running threat assessments with algorithms that had been refined in crucibles of actual warfare. The conclusions they reached made his blood run cold. They're not random, he said suddenly. The pattern of attacks. Look at the galactic map. Elena brought up a display showing the entity's movements. At first glance, it seemed chaotic. Strikes scattered across the outer rim without apparent logic. But when Marcus overlaid the galaxy's communication network, defensive positions, and industrial centers, a terrible strategy emerged. They're cutting our supply lines, he breathed. Every system they've hit was either a communication hub, a manufacturing center, or a strategic resource location. They're not just consuming us. They're dismantling our ability to coordinate a defense. Sarah's face grew pale. That's impossible. How could they understand our infrastructure so quickly? Unless, Elena said slowly, they've done this before, to other galaxies. Other civilizations. The implication hit them all at once. These weren't random destroyers or hungry animals. They were strategists, possibly with millions of years of experience consuming civilizations. The galaxy wasn't facing a natural disaster or a mindless plague. They were being invaded by something that understood exactly how to destroy organized resistance. Admiral, Sarah said urgently, I'm receiving reports of a massive entity approaching the Centauri Collective, the largest industrial complex in the Outer Rim. If it falls, we lose 30% of our shipbuilding capacity. Marcus turned to the command center's central console. His hands moved over controls he had never used but somehow remembered, muscle memory passed down through generations of military training that had never truly ended, only hidden itself. Elena, how many destroyers can we deploy immediately? 12 ships, full combat loadout. But Admiral, they've been dormant for... Do it. The command center erupted in activity as ancient systems came alive. Throughout the vault, massive constructs began to move, their forms unfolding like mechanical flowers blooming in fast motion. The destroyers were beautiful in their terrible efficiency, each one a masterpiece of destruction, designed by a species that had learned warfare in the crucible of a world that tried to kill them every day. As the ships powered up, Marcus felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. Command of a military force engaged in active combat. The weight of decisions that would determine whether entire worlds lived or died. It was a burden humanity had carried for most of its existence, only setting it down when they joined the supposedly enlightened galactic community. Admiral, Elena said quietly, There's something else you need to know. The destroyers aren't our most powerful assets. Marcus looked at her sharply. What do you mean? The Council knows about the conventional weapons. The ships, the satellites, even the planet killers. What they don't know about is Project Prometheus. The name sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Prometheus had been whispered about in the deepest military circles, a project so classified that most people believed it was a myth. The ultimate expression of human military doctrine. If humanity was going to die, they would ensure their enemies died with them. Elena, tell me Prometheus isn't what I think it is. It's exactly what you think it is, she replied. And right now, it might be our only chance. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The tactical displays filled with urgent data streams, all converging on a single terrifying fact. The entity approaching Centauri wasn't just large, it was massive beyond comprehension. Early estimates put its size at roughly equivalent to Earth's moon, and it was moving at a significant fraction of light speed. How is that possible? Sarah's image demanded. Nothing that large should be able to move that fast. Marcus studied the readings with growing dread. Unless it's not solid matter. Elena, run a spectral analysis. I want to know what we're really looking at. The results appeared moments later, and they changed everything. The entity wasn't a ship or a creature or any kind of conventional construct. It was a controlled space-time distortion, a gravitational anomaly that bent reality around itself. It wasn't just consuming matter and energy. It was unmaking the fundamental forces that held the universe together. Dear God, Elena whispered. It's not alive. It's a weapon, a galaxy killer, designed to undo the basic laws of physics. Marcus felt the last vestiges of hope drain away. Conventional weapons, even the most advanced designs humanity had ever created, were useless against something that could rewrite the rules of existence. The galaxy wasn't facing an invasion, it was facing annihilation by forces that operated on principles beyond current understanding.
Admiral, Sarah said urgently, I'm getting reports from Centauri.
They're attempting to evacuate, but the entity's gravitational field is preventing ships from achieving escape velocity. They're trapped. Marcus closed his eyes. Centauri was home to 12 billion beings, the largest concentration of non-human life in the outer rim. If it fell, the psychological impact alone would shatter the Council's remaining unity. How long until our ships reach the system, he asked. 6 hours at maximum deployment speed, Elena replied. And how long until the entity reaches Centauri? 3 hours. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the command center's master display. Across the galaxy, other human installations were coming online. Colony worlds were activating defensive systems that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure. Deep space monitoring stations were revealing their true nature as military observation posts. The peaceful facade humanity had maintained was falling away, revealing the warrior species beneath. But it might not be enough. Against entities that could manipulate space-time itself, even humanity's most terrible weapons seemed inadequate. Unless, Elena, show me the Prometheus files. Admiral, I must strongly advise against. Show me the files. Elena's fingers moved reluctantly across her control interface.
New displays appeared, showing technical specifications that made both of them step back in shock.
Prometheus wasn't just a weapon. It was a final solution. A last resort that would fundamentally alter the nature of local space. My God, Marcus breathed. We actually built this thing? 3 of them, actually, Elena said quietly. 1 in the Sol system, 1 in the Alpha Centauri system, and 1 in deep space near the galactic core. They've been dormant since installation, waiting for activation codes that were only supposed to be used if humanity faced complete extinction. Marcus studied the specifications with growing understanding and horror. Prometheus devices were designed to create controlled quantum vacuums, essentially deleting sections of space-time from existence. Anything caught in their effect would simply cease to be, not destroyed but removed from reality itself. The devices were impossible to stop once activated, and would continue expanding until their energy was exhausted. What's the estimated effect radius? He asked. Approximately 1 light-year per device, Elena replied. Total sterilization of everything within that sphere. Marcus did the calculations. 3 devices, strategically placed, could eliminate massive sections of the galaxy, including most of the inhabited systems, including Earth itself. This isn't a weapon, he said slowly. It's a galactic suicide bomb. It's deterrence, Elena corrected. The ultimate guarantee that if humanity dies, Our enemies die with us. An urgent chime drew their attention back to the main displays. The entity approaching Centauri had begun to change, its gravitational signature shifting in ways that suggested it was preparing to feed. Around the system's star, space itself began to ripple with distortions that hurt to look at directly. Admiral, Sarah's voice carried desperation now. We're receiving final transmissions from Centauri. They're describing reality breaking down around them. Time moving in reverse. Gravity flowing upward. Light becoming solid. Whatever these entities are, they're not just consuming matter. They're consuming the underlying structure of existence itself. Marcus made his decision. Elena, begin activation procedures for the Sol Prometheus device. Sir, I can't do that without confirming authorization from... I am the highest-ranking military officer on Earth with access to these systems, Marcus interrupted. Under Emergency Protocol 7, I have full authorization to deploy any and all weapons necessary to defend humanity. Begin the activation. Elena's hands shook as she entered the command sequences. Around them, the command center's displays shifted to show the status of humanity's ultimate weapon. Deep in the outer solar system, hidden in what appeared to be a routine asteroid mining operation, ancient systems began to wake up.
Activation sequence initiated, Elena reported.
Estimated time to deployment readiness, 4 hours. Marcus nodded grimly. Send a coded message to all human colonies and ships. Operation Lazarus is now in effect. All units are to begin immediate withdrawal to predetermined safe zones. Admiral, Sarah said, what aren't you telling me? Marcus looked at her image, this diplomat who had spent her life building bridges between species that were about to cease to exist. How could he explain that humanity's contingency plans included scenarios where they might have to destroy the galaxy to save it? Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Get the Council to authorize immediate evacuation of all inhabited systems within 50 light-years of Sol. 50 light-years? Marcus, that's hundreds of worlds. Why would we evacuate systems that are nowhere near the threat? Because, Marcus said quietly, in 4 hours those systems are going to become uninhabitable. Forever. The truth began to dawn on Sarah's face. Marcus, what are you planning? The same thing we've always planned, he replied. If we can't win, we make sure the enemy doesn't either. On the tactical displays around them, the entity at Centauri completed its feeding process. 12 billion lives ended in an instant, as the system's star collapsed into a gravitational singularity, then vanished entirely as its constituent matter was converted to pure energy and absorbed. The space where Centauri had existed for billions of years now contained nothing but empty darkness. And in the depths of human space, ancient weapons prepared to ensure that if the galaxy died, it would die on humanity's terms. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives from 12 species spoke simultaneously, their translation matrices struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire exchanges. Fear had stripped away centuries of diplomatic protocol, leaving raw terror in its place. Ambassador Sarah Chen watched the pandemonium with growing dread. She had spent the last 6 hours trying to convince her colleagues to authorize the evacuation Admiral Reeves had requested, but the scale of displacement he was suggesting defied comprehension. Moving the populations of hundreds of worlds would require resources the galaxy didn't possess and time they didn't have. Order! High Counselor Vexnari's voice cut through the cacophony like a blade. We have confirmation that the Centauri Collective has been completely consumed. 12 billion beings gone without trace. We must make decisions based on reality, not wishful thinking. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of environmental systems. On the central display, the space where Centauri had existed showed only empty darkness, not even the residual heat signature that should have remained after such massive destruction. Counselor Zetharam, his crystalline form dimmed with grief, spoke first. This confirms our worst fears. These entities don't simply destroy, they unmake. They are unraveling the basic structure of our universe. Which is why, Representative Thackmore rumbled, his massive stone form trembling with emotion, we must consider the human proposal. Emergency evacuation of all systems within 50 light-years of Sol. The logistics alone make it impossible, protested Ambassador Chindar of the Peaceful Worlds Coalition. We're talking about moving trillions of beings with no guarantee that the areas we're evacuating them to will be any safer. Sarah felt the weight of knowledge she couldn't share pressing down on her shoulders. She knew why Admiral Reeves wanted those systems evacuated. and the truth would shatter what remained of galactic unity. The devices humanity had hidden in the depths of space weren't just weapons, they were instruments of mutually assured annihilation. Perhaps, she said carefully, we should focus on the immediate tactical situation. My government has activated certain defensive assets that may be effective against these entities, but their deployment requires civilian populations to be cleared from potential combat zones. The reaction was swift and predictable. Several representatives began speaking at once, demanding details about these mysterious human weapons. Sarah had expected this, but it didn't make the moment any easier. Ambassador Chen, Vexnari said with forced calm, you are speaking of military assets that should not exist under council law. What exactly has humanity been hiding? Sarah took a deep breath. 300 years ago, when we joined the council, humanity agreed to abandon active military research and dismantle our war fleets. We did so in good faith, believing that the galaxy had truly chosen permanent peace. However, we maintained defensive contingencies in case that peace ever failed catastrophically. Contingencies? Councillor Zetharim's form flashed with indignation. You mean weapons? Weapons that violate every treaty humanity has signed.
Yes, Sarah replied simply.
We mean weapons. The chamber erupted. Accusations of betrayal mixed with demands for immediate sanctions against humanity. Through it all, Sarah remained standing, waiting for the storm to pass. She had known this moment would come eventually. Every species in the galaxy suspected that humanity hadn't truly abandoned its violent nature. They had simply been waiting for proof. You have betrayed everything the Council stands for. Representative Cortal's voice carried barely controlled rage. 3 centuries of progress, of trust, of cooperation, and you reveal yourselves as the barbaric warmongers we always suspected you were. And yet, Sarah said quietly, we're the only species offering solutions instead of evacuations. The truth in her words cut through the anger like cold steel. For all their moral outrage, none of the other species had presented viable options for fighting the entities. Their defensive fleets were designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. Their weapons were built for deterrence, not destruction. They had created a perfect civilization for a galaxy at peace, but they were helpless against forces that wanted to end all existence. What kind of weapons are we talking about? Vexnari asked, her tentacles coiled with tension. Sarah hesitated. How could she explain that humanity's ultimate contingency wasn't designed to save the galaxy, but to deny it to their enemies? How could she tell these peaceful beings that her species had built devices capable of sterilizing entire sectors of space? Weapons designed to fight entities that conventional forces cannot touch, she said finally. But their use comes with significant consequences. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency broadcasts filled the chamber's displays, showing real-time data from the galaxy's outer rim. The entities weren't just continuing their advance. They were accelerating, and their numbers were growing. Impossible, breathed Dr. Koltes, the Council's chief science advisor. Energy signatures indicate at least 50 major entities now active in our galaxy. Yesterday, we detected fewer than 20. Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. They're reproducing? Or, Dr. Koltes said grimly, calling for reinforcements. New data streams flooded the displays. Long-range sensors were detecting massive gravitational disturbances in the intergalactic void. Something was coming toward their galaxy, something so large that it bent space-time around itself like a lens. Estimated arrival time? Vexnari asked. Based on current trajectory and acceleration, 18 days. The chamber fell silent. In 18 days, whatever was approaching would arrive to find a galaxy already being consumed by the advanced entities. They weren't facing an invasion, they were facing a harvesting operation with the main force arriving to collect whatever the scouts had prepared. Honored Counselor, Sarah said formally, I request permission to address this assembly with classified information regarding humanity's defensive capabilities. Vexnari's ancient eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Sarah feel like she was being dissected. You may proceed, Ambassador. But know that what you reveal will determine how the galaxy views your species for all time. Sarah activated her personal security protocols, sending encrypted signals to Earth that would authorize the release of information that had been hidden for 3 centuries. Around the chamber, holographic displays materialized, showing technical specifications that made several representatives gasp in shock. These are destroyer-class warships, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing, designed for combat against overwhelming odds. Unlike Sentinel fleet vessels, which prioritize protection and precision, destroyers exist solely to eliminate threats through maximum application of force. The specifications were staggering, ships 3 times larger than the biggest Sentinel vessels, armed with weapons that could crack planet crusts, and shielded with technology that converted incoming energy into additional firepower. They were everything the galaxy had agreed to leave behind when they chose peace over power. 12 of these vessels are currently deploying to intercept the entity cluster approaching the hegemony worlds, Sarah continued. But they represent only a fraction of humanity's defensive capabilities. She paused, knowing that her next words would change everything. We also maintain planet-based defensive systems capable of creating localized space-time distortions. These systems can eliminate threats that exist beyond conventional physics by removing them from reality itself. The chamber's environmental systems couldn't compensate for the collective intake of breath from a dozen species. Councillor Zetharim's crystalline form went completely transparent, a sign of shock so severe it bordered on trauma. You're talking about quantum deletion, Dr. O. Coltess whispered. Theoretical weapons that would be impossible to control once activated. Not theoretical, Sarah replied. And you're correct about control. Once deployed, these devices cannot be recalled or redirected. They will continue to expand until their energy is exhausted, eliminating everything within their effect radius. Representative Thekmore's massive form began to crack with stress patterns that indicated panic. What is the effect radius of these devices? Approximately 1 light-year per installation. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the station's background system seemed to hold their breath as the implication sank in. Sarah watched her colleagues' faces change as they realized what humanity had built, what they had been living next to for 3 centuries without knowing it. You built galaxy killers, Vexenari said, her voice barely above a whisper. Weapons designed to sterilize entire sectors of space. We built deterrents, Sarah corrected. Guarantees that if our species faced extinction, we wouldn't face it alone. Where are they located? Demanded Ambassador Korthal. Sarah's silence was answer enough. The devices were positioned to maximize coverage of inhabited space, which meant they were close enough to every major population center to be activated with minimal warning. Humanity hadn't just built weapons of mass destruction, they had aimed them at the galaxy's heart. You're holding us all hostage, Councillor Zetharim accused. Every moment of the last 3 centuries you've been holding a gun to the galaxy's head. And every moment of the last 3 centuries, Sarah replied. That gun has kept the peace. No species has dared launch aggressive actions against others knowing that humanity remained in the galaxy as an unknown factor. It was a terrible truth, but it was truth nonetheless. The Galactic Council's peace hadn't been maintained by enlightenment and cooperation alone. It had been underwritten by the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, the children of Earth retained their capacity for absolute destruction. How many? Vexnari asked quietly. 3 devices, strategically positioned to provide complete coverage of inhabited space. The mathematics were simple and horrifying. 3 one-light-year spheres of quantum deletion, properly positioned, could sterilize most of the galaxy's civilized regions. Not destroy them, erase them from existence, leaving nothing but empty space where entire star systems had once thrived. And you're suggesting we use these things? Representative Thekmore's voice carried disbelief. I'm suggesting we prepare to use them if conventional forces fail, Sarah clarified. The entities we're facing don't operate by conventional physics. They exist as controlled space-time distortions, which means they might be vulnerable to quantum deletion effects. Might be vulnerable? Councillor Zetharim's form flashed with fury. You want to destroy the galaxy based on might be? I want to ensure that if the galaxy is going to die anyway, it dies on our terms rather than theirs. The brutal honesty of the statement silenced further objections. Around the chamber, representatives struggled with a choice that previous generations had never faced: submit to annihilation by incomprehensible forces, or risk annihilation by humanity's hidden weapons. There is another consideration, Dr. Coltess said slowly. The approaching main force. Even if we eliminate the current entities, we have no defense against what's coming from intergalactic space. Sarah activated another classified file, and the chamber's displays showed humanity's deepest military secret. Actually, we do, but you're not going to like it. The new specifications appeared, and this time several representatives physically staggered under the implications. Humanity hadn't just built 3 quantum deletion devices, they had built them as a network, designed to cascade if simultaneously activated. A galaxy-wide quantum deletion event, Sarah explained with clinical detachment. 3 devices activating in sequence, their effects overlapping to create an expanding wave of non-existence that would sterilize the entire galactic disk. "You're insane," whispered Representative Korthal. "That would kill everything. Every world, every species, every form of life in the galaxy." "Yes," Sarah agreed, "but it would also kill whatever is coming to harvest us. And sometimes denying your enemy victory is the only victory possible." The weight of the choice settled over the chamber like a shroud. 300 years of galactic civilization had led to this moment, the choice between certain death and mutual annihilation. Outside the station's walls, space itself began to ripple with gravitational distortions. The entities were getting closer, and their effects were becoming visible to the naked eye. Stars flickered and dimmed as reality warped around the approaching destroyers. "How long before the quantum devices can be activated?" Vexnari asked. "Sol device is ready now," Sarah replied. "The other 2 require approximately 6 hours for full deployment readiness."
And the conventional forces?
"The destroyer ships? First contact in 37 minutes." The chamber's display shifted to show tactical data from the approaching battle. 12 human ships against entities that had already consumed dozens of worlds without suffering any apparent damage. It would be the first real test of whether conventional weapons could harm forces that existed beyond normal physics. "We will observe the outcome of this engagement," Vexnari decided. "If humanity's conventional forces prove effective, we will support their deployment galaxy-wide. If they fail," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. If humanity's most advanced weapons couldn't touch the entities, then the galaxy faced a choice between slavery and suicide. And for the first time in 3 centuries, the children of Earth would decide the fate of every living thing among the stars. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching space twist and writhe ahead of them like a living thing in agony. The entity they were approaching wasn't just large. It was a violation of physics made manifest, a sphere of impossible angles that hurt to look at directly. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who knew they were about to die. These weren't the diplomats and explorers who crewed the Sentinel fleet vessels. These were soldiers, descendants of warriors who had volunteered to remain hidden in the shadows while the rest of humanity embraced peace. "Status report," Elena commanded. "All weapon systems online," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from Tactical. "Primary quantum destabilizers show green across all boards. Secondary conventional batteries locked and loaded. Defensive screens at maximum projection." Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The entity ahead of them registered as a sphere roughly the size of Earth's moon, but its mass readings fluctuated wildly between 0 and infinity. Whatever it was, it operated by rules that conventional physics couldn't explain. "Communications? Any response to our hailing frequencies?"
Negative, Captain.
"But we are detecting something unusual. The entity appears to be scanning us." Elena felt ice crawl up her spine. "Scanning how?" "Unknown method, but our AI cores are reporting intrusion attempts. Something is trying to access our tactical databases. All hands, implement Protocol Omega immediately. Purge all non-essential data and activate quantum firewalls." Protocol Omega was humanity's answer to the possibility that their enemies might possess capabilities beyond current understanding. Every piece of information that wasn't absolutely necessary for the current mission would be deleted, leaving only the minimum data required for combat operations. "Captain," called out Dr. Sarah Kim from the science station, "I'm reading massive gravitational fluctuations ahead. The entity is beginning to alter local space-time." On the main view screen, space itself began to ripple around the entity. Stars visible behind it began to shift position, their light bending in impossible directions. Reality was becoming fluid, malleable in ways that should have been impossible outside the event horizon of a black hole. "Distance to target?" Elena asked. 50,000 kilometers and closing. At current approach speed, we'll be within weapons range in 12 minutes. Elena studied the tactical readouts with growing unease. The other 11 destroyer-class ships were approaching from different vectors, their formations designed to maximize firepower while minimizing the chance that a single enemy attack could eliminate multiple vessels. It was a strategy developed through centuries of warfare against conventional enemies. But nothing about this situation was conventional. "Captain, incoming transmission from Admiral Reeves." Elena activated her command console, and Admiral Marcus Reeves' image appeared before her. Even through the quantum communication link, she could see the strain on his face. Elena, I need you to understand something about what you're facing. Our deep analysis suggests these entities aren't just weapons. They're scouts for something far worse. Your mission isn't just to test our capabilities against them. It's to send a message to whatever sent them. What kind of message, Admiral? That this galaxy isn't defenseless. That we have the will and capability to fight. If our weapons prove effective, it might convince the main force to look elsewhere for easier prey. Elena felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just leading an attack, she was representing the entire galaxy's capacity for resistance. If they failed here, if humanity's most advanced weapons proved useless, then the quantum deletion devices might be the only option left. Understood, Admiral. What about the evacuation zones? Proceeding as planned. We've managed to clear most civilian populations from the 50 light-year radius around Sol, though we haven't told them why. The other Council species are cooperating, but they're getting suspicious about our urgency. And the Prometheus devices?
Marcus's image flickered with interference.
All three are now online and ready for deployment. Elena, I need you to know. If I give the activation order, you'll have approximately 6 hours before the quantum deletion effect reaches your position. 6 hours to escape the expanding sphere of non-existence that would erase everything within a light year of its origin point. Elena did the mathematics quickly. At maximum speed, the retribution could cover perhaps half that distance before being caught in the deletion effect. Admiral, if you activate Prometheus, we won't be able to escape the effect radius. I know, Marcus replied quietly. I'm hoping it won't come to that. The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with the weight of command and the knowledge that her next actions might determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. Around her, the bridge crew continued their preparations, unaware that their admiral was prepared to sacrifice them, and himself, to ensure the galaxy's survival. Captain, we're receiving signals from the other destroyer vessels. All ships report ready for combat. Elena activated the fleet communications network, her voice reaching 11 other captains who faced the same impossible odds. This is Vasquez aboard Retribution. All vessels, prepare for coordinated attack. Target designation Alpha. Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity, we're fighting for every species in this galaxy. The responses came back quickly, each captain acknowledging the order with voices that carried centuries of military tradition. These ships represented the culmination of human military engineering, armed with weapons that could shatter planets and defended by shields that could withstand stellar phenomena. Against entities that existed beyond physics, they might not be enough. 2 minutes to weapons range, Torres reported. Elena watched the tactical display as the 12 human ships closed on their target. The entity ahead of them continued its impossible existence, a sphere of warped space-time that seemed to pulse with malevolent intelligence. As they approached, it began to change, its surface rippling with patterns that suggested awareness of their presence. Captain, massive energy buildup detected within the entity. Whatever it's doing, it's drawing power from local space. Elena made her decision. All ships engage immediately. Full quantum destabilizer barrage maximum yield. The space around the entity erupted in light as 12 of humanity's most powerful weapons fired simultaneously. Quantum destabilizers worked by unraveling the fundamental forces that held matter together, reducing targets to constituent energy that could then be safely dispersed. Against conventional enemies, they were devastatingly effective. Against the entity, they did exactly nothing. The beam struck the impossible sphere and simply disappeared, not absorbed or reflected, but erased from existence as if they had never been fired. The entity continued its approach, apparently unaffected by weapons that could have destroyed a small moon. No effect, Torres reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. Switching to secondary armaments. Elena watched in growing horror as conventional projectiles, energy beams, and even nuclear warheads struck the entity without result. Every weapon humanity had developed, refined through centuries of conflict, proved useless against forces that operated beyond the rules of normal existence. Captain, the entity is responding. Space around the 12 human ships suddenly became liquid. Gravitational fields shifted and twisted, creating tidal forces that should have torn the vessels apart. The Retribution's defensive screens flared to life, trying to compensate for forces that changed direction and intensity faster than the ship's computers could calculate. Hull stress approaching critical levels, reported the engineering station. Whatever this thing is doing, our defensive systems can't adapt fast enough. Elena gripped her command chair as the ship bucked and twisted around her. Through the view screen, she could see the other destroyer vessels struggling against similar effects. The UES Devastator, one of the most heavily armored ships in humanity's hidden fleet, was actually beginning to elongate as tidal forces pulled at its superstructure. All ships, emergency scatter pattern. Maximum evasion, maintain weapons fire. It was a desperate maneuver, but it was all she could think of. The 12 ships broke formation, each one following a different vector away from the entity while continuing to pour firepower at their target. For a moment, Elena hoped they might be able to outrun the gravitational distortions. Then the entity moved. It didn't accelerate or maneuver like a conventional craft. Instead, it simply relocated itself, appearing instantaneously closer to the human fleet. Space folded around it like origami, bringing it within point-blank range of ships that had been kilometers away moments before. Impossible, breathed Dr. Pry. Kim. It's manipulating space-time directly, moving without traveling. The entity's surface began to glow with patterns that hurt to look at, geometric forms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. Elena felt her vision blur as her brain struggled to interpret sensory input that violated every assumption about how reality worked. Captain, massive energy discharge incoming. The entity released something that wasn't quite energy and wasn't quite matter. It struck the UES Devastator directly, and Elena watched in horror as the massive warship simply began to disappear. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from existence, one section at a time, starting from the point of impact and spreading outward like a slow-motion explosion of non-being. Devastator, respond. Elena called out, but there was no response. The ship's communication array had already been deleted from reality. Captain, we're being targeted, Torres shouted. Elena didn't hesitate. Emergency quantum jump, now. The Retribution's experimental faster-than-light drive engaged, tearing a hole in space-time that allowed the ship to escape into quantum foam. For a terrifying moment, they existed in the space between dimensions, surrounded by the raw mathematics of creation. When they emerged back into normal space, they were 50,000 kilometers away from the entity. Behind them, where the human fleet had been, only empty darkness remained. 11 ships and their crews had been erased from existence, leaving no trace of their sacrifice, except the memory of those who had witnessed it.
Status report, Elena commanded, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what had just happened.
All systems functional. We appear to have escaped without damage. Elena activated the emergency communication array, sending a priority message to Earth. Admiral Reeves, this is Captain Vasquez, aboard Retribution. Mission status, total failure. Conventional weapons have no effect on the entities. 11 ships destroyed. Recommend immediate activation of Prometheus devices. The response came back within minutes, and Elena could hear the weight of decision in Marcus's voice. Negative on Prometheus activation, fall back to Rally Point Delta and await further orders. We're not ready to destroy the galaxy yet. Sir, with respect, we have no other options. These entities are immune to every weapon we possess. They exist beyond physics as we understand it. Elena, there's something you need to know. The entity you engaged wasn't trying to destroy you. Our analysis of the engagement shows it was studying your tactics, learning how human weapons function. It deliberately allowed you to escape. The implication hit Elena like a physical blow. The entity hadn't been defeated by their emergency jump. It had simply decided to let them go. They had been laboratory subjects, test animals being examined by intelligences that viewed them as barely worth noticing. Admiral, if these things are studying us, then they're preparing for the main invasion force. We need to activate Prometheus before they can report back. Negative. We're going to try one more thing first. Something we haven't used since the Great War. Elena felt her blood turn to ice. Sir, surely you don't mean... I mean exactly that. We're going to wake up the sleepers. The sleepers. Elena had heard whispers of them in the deepest military circles. Legends of warriors so dangerous that they had been placed in quantum stasis rather than risk them awakening during peacetime. Soldiers who had volunteered to have their consciousness merged with artificial intelligences, creating hybrid entities that combined human intuition with machine precision. Admiral, the sleepers have been in stasis for 3 centuries. There's no guarantee they'll still be functional. There's no guarantee of anything anymore, Elena. But if these entities want to study us, let's give them something really interesting to examine. Elena closed her eyes, imagining the horror of what Marcus was suggesting. The sleepers weren't just enhanced humans. They were something entirely new, beings that existed at the intersection of biology and technology. They had been created for one purpose: to fight enemies that conventional forces couldn't touch. "How long until they can be awakened?" she asked. 6 hours for full reanimation sequence. Elena, I want you to return to Earth immediately. When the sleepers wake up, they're going to need ships, and the Retribution is the only vessel we have that's proven capable of surviving contact with these entities. Elena felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders again. She was no longer just a ship captain. She was becoming part of humanity's last desperate gambit to save the galaxy from annihilation. Understood, Admiral. Setting course for Earth immediately. As the Retribution jumped back towards Sol, Elena looked out at the stars and wondered how many of them would still exist in a week's time. The entities were accelerating their advance, and the main invasion force was still approaching from intergalactic space. Somewhere in the darkness, ancient things that had been human were beginning to wake up. And, for the first time since the crisis began, Elena allowed herself to feel a tiny spark of hope. The galaxy's peace was ending. The Age of War was about to begin, and humanity was finally going to stop pretending to be something they weren't. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in chambers that had been sealed for 300 years, something that had once been human opened eyes that glowed with quantum fire. Colonel Marcus Chen, the ancestor of Ambassador Sarah Chen, felt consciousness return like lightning through neural pathways that were part flesh, part crystallized thought. The awakening process was agony. 3 centuries of quantum stasis had preserved his body and mind perfectly, but the transition back to active existence meant experiencing every moment of stored memory simultaneously. Wars fought and won, comrades lost to time and violence. The final desperate choice to undergo the sleeper transformation, rather than watch humanity's warrior class be disbanded forever. Around him, in identical stasis chambers, 49 other sleepers began their own resurrections. They were the last of their kind, volunteers who had chosen to become something between human and machine, rather than accept the galaxy's demand for permanent peace. Each one was a master of warfare, enhanced with technology that wouldn't be invented for another millennium. Marcus sat up slowly, his body adjusting to gravity after centuries of weightless suspension. His enhanced nervous system immediately began processing data streams from Luna's defense network, updating him on the current crisis with the speed of thought. In seconds, he absorbed everything: the entities consuming star systems, the failure of conventional weapons, the approaching main invasion force. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying harmonics that normal human vocal cords couldn't produce. The chamber's AI responded immediately. "Colonel Chen, all 50 sleepers have been successfully awakened. Physical enhancement systems show optimal functionality. Quantum consciousness matrices are stable. You are cleared for immediate combat operations." Marcus stood, feeling synthetic muscle fibers integrate seamlessly with biological tissue. His body was no longer entirely human, though it retained human form. Centuries of technological advancement had been compressed into the sleeper enhancement process, creating warriors who could function in environments that would kill baseline humans instantly. "Show me current tactical situation." Holographic displays materialized around him, showing the galaxy's deteriorating situation in real time. The entities had consumed 17 more star systems while he slept, each one disappearing without leaving debris or survivors. Worse, their advance was accelerating, suggesting they were learning to optimize their consumption process. "Where are the other sleepers?" Marcus asked. "Distributed across the solar system, according to Lazarus Protocol specifications. Each unit has been assigned specific mission parameters based on their pre-stasis specializations." "Quite," Marcus nodded. The sleepers weren't just enhanced soldiers. They were specialists in types of warfare that had been deemed too dangerous for the peaceful galaxy. Some focused on reality manipulation, others on quantum combat, still others on fighting enemies that existed beyond conventional physics. His personal communication array activated, connecting him to Admiral Marcus Reeves, his distant descendant who now commanded humanity's military forces. The irony wasn't lost on him that his own bloodline had been chosen to make the decision to wake him. "Colonel Chen, thank God you're functional. We need options, and we need them now." Marcus reviewed the tactical data with the speed of enhanced cognition.
Admiral, conventional warfare is useless against these entities.
They exist as controlled space-time distortions, which means they operate outside the physical laws our weapons are designed to exploit. Then, how do we fight them? We don't fight them conventionally. We fight them with weapons designed for unconventional warfare. Marcus gestured, and new displays appeared showing technical specifications that made Admiral Reeves step back in shock. These are reality anchors, Marcus explained. Devices that can lock local spacetime into fixed configurations, preventing the entities from manipulating dimensional structure. Combined with quantum phase weapons that can strike targets existing in parallel dimensions, we might be able to engage them on equal terms. How long to deploy these systems? The devices already exist. We built them before entering stasis, then hid them throughout human space. Give me 6 hours to coordinate activation, and we can turn the solar system into a battlefield where physics works in our favor. Admiral Reeves was quiet for a moment. Colonel, there's something else. The main invasion force from intergalactic space. Our projections show it arriving within 12 days, and its mass exceeds anything we've ever encountered. We're talking about something the size of a solar system moving at significant fractions of light speed. Marcus processed this information with growing understanding. They're not invaders, they're harvesters. The entities currently in our galaxy are advanced scouts, preparing the local environment for efficient resource extraction. When the main force arrives, they'll consume everything and move on to the next galaxy. Can your reality anchors stop something that size? No, Marcus replied honestly. But they might be able to create zones where the Prometheus devices can function effectively. If we're going to sterilize the galaxy to deny it to the harvesters, we need to ensure the quantum deletion effect can propagate properly. The weight of that statement settled between them. Even with the sleepers awake and reality warping weapons at their disposal, humanity's best-case scenario still involved destroying everything they were trying to protect. There is another option, Marcus said slowly. Something we discovered during the Great War but never used because the risks were too extreme. I'm listening. The entities exist as space-time distortions, but they're controlled distortions. Something is directing them, maintaining their coherence across interstellar distances. If we can trace that control signal back to its source and disrupt it, the entities would collapse? More than that. If our calculations are correct, disrupting their control network would cause a cascade failure throughout the entire harvester fleet. The main invasion force, the advanced scouts, everything would destabilize simultaneously. Admiral Reeves leaned forward. What would that require? A sleeper would have to physically interface with one of the entities, tracing the control signal through quantum dimensional space back to its origin. Then they would need to introduce a catastrophic virus into the network, something designed to propagate through consciousness itself. That sounds like suicide. It is suicide, Marcus confirmed. The sleeper performing the interface would need to merge their consciousness with the entity's control matrix. Even if the plan succeeds, they wouldn't survive the process. Admiral Reeves was quiet for a long moment. Would it work? Unknown. We're dealing with intelligences that might be millions of years older than us, using technology we can barely comprehend, but it's the only plan that offers the possibility of saving the galaxy instead of destroying it. How long would you need to prepare? Marcus was already running calculations through his enhanced consciousness, coordinating with the other sleepers through quantum-entangled communication links. 4 hours to modify our consciousness transfer protocols for the interface. 2 hours to position the necessary equipment. Call it 6 hours total. Do it. The next 6 hours transformed the solar system into humanity's last fortress. Reality anchors came online throughout human space, creating zones where the fundamental laws of physics were locked into configurations that favored human weapons. Long-range sensors detected the approaching entity swarm. No longer dozens, but hundreds of the space-time distortions, all converging on Sol with obvious intent. Marcus stood aboard the UES Retribution, now extensively modified to serve as a platform for the consciousness interface attempt. Around him, the other sleepers prepared for battle with weapons and equipment that existed at the cutting edge of theoretical possibility. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the preparations with undisguised awe. Colonel, I've seen our most advanced military technology, but this equipment is beyond anything in our databases. The Sleeper program wasn't just about enhancing human soldiers, Marcus replied. It was about preparing for warfare against enemies that hadn't been born yet. We designed our weapons to fight threats we could barely imagine. On the main tactical display, the approaching entities had begun to slow their advance. The reality anchors were having an effect, forcing them to expend energy maintaining their space-time distortions instead of simply existing within them. It was the first time human technology had shown any ability to influence the entity's behavior. Contact in 30 minutes, reported the tactical officer, reading approximately 200 PMs in the primary wave. Marcus activated his personal combat systems, feeling synthetic neural networks integrate with biological consciousness. His perception expanded beyond normal human limits, allowing him to perceive dimensional structures that existed parallel to normal space. Through enhanced sensors, he could see the entities clearly for the first time, not just as gravitational distortions, but as vast technological constructs guided by intelligences that spanned multiple dimensions. "They're beautiful," he whispered, understanding for the first time why civilizations didn't resist them. The entities weren't just weapons or tools, they were art, expressions of scientific and aesthetic achievement that transcended anything humanity had ever imagined. "Sir?" Captain Vasquez asked. "Nothing," Marcus replied, forcing himself to focus on the mission. Beauty or not, the entities represented the end of everything he had ever known or loved. Begin the interface protocol. Around him, quantum dimensional machinery activated, creating a bridge between normal space and the higher dimensions where the entities truly existed. Marcus felt his consciousness begin to separate from his physical body, expanding into realms of existence that human language had no words to describe. The first contact was agony beyond description. Marcus's enhanced mind made contact with something vast and alien, an intelligence that regarded entire galaxies the way humans might view bacteria colonies. For a moment, he was overwhelmed by the sheer scope of what he was facing, consciousness that had existed since the universe was young, harvesting civilizations across cosmic time with the methodical patience of geological forces. But within that alien vastness, Marcus found what he was looking for. The control network that coordinated the harvester fleet was vast beyond comprehension, but it was still a network. It had nodes, pathways, vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone willing to sacrifice everything. "I'm in," he reported through the quantum link, his voice reaching his human companions across dimensional barriers. Beginning virus deployment. The virus he introduced wasn't conventional malware, but something far more dangerous, a conceptual weapon that attacked the fundamental assumptions underlying the harvester network. It was designed to propagate through consciousness itself, spreading doubt and contradiction through intelligences that had operated on absolute certainty for millions of years. The effect was immediate. Throughout local space, entities began to falter as their control signals became corrupted. Their perfect space-time distortion started to collapse. And for the first time since the crisis began, human weapons found targets they could actually damage. "It's working," Captain Vasquez reported. "The entities are destabilizing." "All ships engage at will." But Marcus barely heard her. He was deep within the harvester network now, his consciousness racing through pathways that connected not just the local entities, but the main invasion force approaching from intergalactic space. The virus was spreading, but the network was fighting back, deploying countermeasures that threatened to trap his consciousness within its vast structure. "Marcus, you need to get out of there." Admiral Reeves's voice reached him through layers of alien thought. "The entities are collapsing, but something's trying to follow the virus back to its source." Marcus understood. The harvester intelligence was attempting to trace the attack back to Earth, to locate the source of the virus and eliminate it. If it succeeded, humanity's location would be revealed to forces that could sterilize the entire solar system in retaliation. He had one choice left. Marcus severed his connection to his physical body, diving deeper into the harvester network than any human consciousness was meant to go. Behind him, he felt his enhanced body collapse aboard the Retribution, neural pathways burning out as his consciousness abandoned them forever. But his sacrifice bought them what they needed. The virus completed its propagation through the network just as the harvester intelligence reached Earth's location. Instead of finding a target to destroy, it found a trap. Marcus's consciousness had become a quantum mine, designed to detonate when the enemy intelligence touched it. The explosion occurred across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The harvester network, evolved over millions of years of unopposed expansion, had never encountered anything like it. Conceptual viruses and consciousness bombs were weapons that could only be created by species desperate enough to sacrifice their own minds in warfare. Across the galaxy, harvester entities began to collapse. Their control signals cut, their space-time distortions unsustainable. They reverted to simple matter and energy that could be destroyed by conventional weapons. The advanced scouts that had consumed dozens of star systems simply stopped existing. But the greatest victory came from deep space. The main invasion force, larger than solar systems and older than civilization, found its control network corrupted beyond repair. Unable to maintain coherence, the vast harvester fleet began to break apart, its components scattering across intergalactic space as inert debris. "Status report," Admiral Reeves requested, his voice carrying exhaustion and grief. "All local entities neutralized," Captain Vasquez replied. "Long-range sensors show the main invasion forces dispersed. The threat appears to be over." "And Colonel Chen?" Captain Vasquez looked at the monitoring stations where the sleeper's vital signs had flatlined. "He's gone, sir." The consciousness transfer was one way. He saved us all, but he didn't make it back. Admiral Reeves was quiet for a moment. Signal all ships. The crisis is over. Begin search and rescue operations for any survivors in the affected systems. But even as the immediate threat ended, the implications of what had happened were only beginning to sink in. The galaxy had been saved, but at a cost that would reshape everything. Humanity had proven they were not the peaceful farmers the Council wanted them to be. They were the descendants of warriors, the children of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years and failed. When faced with extinction, they had done what they always did. They had found a way to fight, regardless of the cost. The other species of the galaxy would remember this. They would remember that when cosmic horrors came from the darkness between stars, it had been humanity's hidden weapons and willing sacrifices that saved them all. The age of peace was over. Humanity had tried to be something other than what they were, had bent themselves into shapes that fit the galaxy's desire for harmony. But when the ultimate test came, when existence itself hung in the balance, they had remembered their true nature. They were survivors. They were warriors, and they had walked away from peace forever. In the depths of space, the scattered remains of the Harvester fleet drifted like monuments to the idea that intelligence and technology could overcome any resistance. They had been wrong. Some species, forged in the crucibles of violent worlds, possessed something that pure intelligence could never fully understand or defeat. They possessed the will to fight monsters, even when the price was everything they held dear. The galaxy was safe, but it would never be the same. And in the hidden chambers beneath distant moons, the remaining sleepers returned to their quantum stasis, waiting for the next time the galaxy would need its children of war to wake up and remind the universe that some species simply refused to die quietly. The warnings had been ignored for too long. But humanity had learned something the Council never understood. Sometimes, the only way to preserve peace is to be prepared for war. And they would be ready, always.